Good morning. This is Catherine Cooper, and thank you very much, everyone, for coming to the 5 transformational commitments required to rescue the planet, your organization, and your life, and with our special guest, Dr. Bob Doppelt. And I'm going to, first of all, do a few introduction slides in order to give time for the others to join us, because we have about 22 people coming on now, and I expect they're just delayed because of WebEx. So I just wanted to let you know a little bit about the Sustainability Learning Center and the kind of programs that we run here. We do run instructor-led face-to-face programs on things like greenhouse gas reduction and life cycle assessment and design for environment and leadership training and that sort of thing. We also have a series of lunch and learn programs that we do, of which this series is one, which is targeted to green teams to help them through the whole sustainability journey within their own operations. We provide skill certification, and we have an e-learning platform with 51 different e-learning sustainability modules associated with it, everything from sustainable supply chains, green purchasing, green fleets, green buildings. It's quite a combination of great programs. And at the end of this session, we will be posting Bob's presentation on our Sustainability Learning Network. So you just need to go out to our website, log in, which is in the upper right-hand corner, and you will be able to watch this again and again. So that would be great. So the objective of our Lunch and Learn series is to provide green teams and their members with practical approaches and tools to advance sustainability. And you may know that last month we had Bob Willard talking about the strong business case for sustainability. And our format today will be that Bob will be talking for 30 to 40 minutes, and then we're going to open it up for questions and answers. So we would like you to put any questions in the chat, and at the end you could ask them. We'll allow people to unmute themselves, and you could ask them as well. And I do have a dialogue question. I would like to get some discussion going, if we can, around how we can use the information that Bob's bringing to us today. Just a little bit of information about your WebEx tool in front of you. In the far lower left-hand screen, left-hand side of your screen, you can see a little button that says full screen, so you can make the slides full screen if you want. Mine reads 77% right now. I don't know what yours reads, but you can make your screen bigger or smaller. You can see the participants in the right-hand side in the participant panel, as well as in the chat. If you put the send to everyone, then we will be able to see your questions, and feel free to comment as the discussions go on as well. And we're going to ask you to be muting your microphone while we're having this Bob's presentation. And so I'd like to introduce to you today Bob Doppelt, and he's the Executive Director of the Resource Innovation Group, and he's a Senior Fellow with Willamette University and an Adjunct Professor at the University of Oregon. And Bob has been working in this area for quite some time. He teaches systems thinking and global warming policy. And he's also taught in the Presidio Graduate School at San Francisco and the Bainbridge Graduate Institute in Seattle. And he's also a counseling psychologist, which I think is very interesting, and it's a good contribution to this whole dialogue, as well as an environmental land manager. And his expertise is individual, organizational, and systems dynamic and change. And Bob's written quite a few books in the last little while: The Power of Sustainable Thinking, How to Create Positive Future for the Climate, the Planet, and Your Life in 2008, Leading Change Towards Sustainability, a Change Management Guide for Business, Government, and Civil Society, and the one we're going to hear about today, which is just newly released, Me to We, Transformative, 5 Commitments Required to Rescue the Planet, Your Organization, and Your Life. So with that, I'm going to move over to Bob's presentation. Bob, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Well, it's my pleasure. Thank you, Catherine, for the introduction, and hello to everybody.
I don't know what happened. I managed to get in.
Is there somebody on the phone that needs to be muted? Well, good afternoon, everyone. I want to start by asking you all a few questions for you to ponder. How many of you think that you understand what drives you to do what you do in your life? How many of you really think you understand why it is you do what you do? And just think about that. And how many of you believe you know how to change your thinking and behavior? For example, have you been successful in losing weight or reducing your use of alcohol or stopping smoking, et cetera, whenever you wanted to? Do you really think you have a sense of how to change your thinking and behavior? And finally, for those of you who work in organizations, how many of you believe that your organization can deliver the 60 to 80% or more reduction in greenhouse gas emissions that are going to be required to resolve climate change? Those are questions just to sort of think about to get us going, because that's the kinds of issues I'm trying to address in my work and what we're going to talk about this morning. And the point I want to make through those questions is that the question is, how do you see yourself in your role in sustainability? Do you see yourself as a technician, as an engineer, and a practitioner, or do you think of yourself as a change agent and that your dominant job is to create and generate and motivate people to change the way they think and behave? And this morning I'm going to try to convince you that that is exactly your job. The greatest challenge facing humanity today is to find ways to motivate ourselves and our organizations, our communities, and political institutions to alter the way we think and behave, and in specific to create what I call a culture of accountability for sustainable thinking and acting. And that the technical aspects of that will follow once we really focus on changing the way we think and behave. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to focus on that by suggesting that sustainable thinking and acting can be thought of as 5 interrelated commitments that are needed to address today's complex social and ecological challenges, including climate change. I'm then going to suggest that those commitments add up to a shift from our traditional focus on almost an exclusive focus on me, on yourself and your organizations and your families' needs and desires, to a focus on we, which I define as other people here and abroad, and the ecological systems that support you, support them, and support all life on Earth. Sustainable thinking and acting really involves a shift from focusing only on me to focusing on a much broader and more encompassing we. And finally this morning I'm going to talk about how you can alter your personal thinking and behavior and that of your organizations to embed a shift from me to we into your practices. I would like everyone just to take a big, deep breath for a moment and relax. Just relax and sit back and take a deep breath. And now I'd like to ask you to just ponder what happened. What did you just do? In fact, you breathed in oxygen and you breathed out CO2. And we often forget that or don't realize that only a small amount of the energy that your body uses comes from food and water. The vast majority of it comes from the oxygen you breathe. The oxygen detoxifies your blood, it strengthens your immune system, it rebuilds your body, and breaks down the food and water you breathe into the energy you use. Now, how many of you actually know where this energy came from, where this oxygen came from, About 3/4 of it was produced through photosynthesis in single-cell green algae and bacteria and marine environments. And about 1/4 of it, the rest of it, comes from the same processes in forests and other vegetation. So complex interactions occurring in the oceans and in the landscapes all around you created the oxygen that makes your life possible. How conscious are you of these complex relationships every time you take a breath? Here is a fundamental truth. Nothing exists on its own. Everything on Earth, including ourselves, is created by and sustained by some other processes. This is the natural law of sustainability, the first natural law of sustainability, the law of interdependence. The boundaries we create to distinguish ourselves from other people, our organizations from one another, humans from the so-called natural environment, the economy from social systems, all these differentiations, these boundaries, are not real. They are just illusions. And we create these fantasies in our head in order to divide the world into smaller pieces under the belief that we can better control and understand the world around us. And this does have some benefits, an important process, but if we don't understand that it's an illusion, we really can cause some problems. The reality is that all life on Earth, as I said, including our own, is created by and sustained by a complex web of ecological and social systems. No life exists on its own. And if you're not constantly aware of this complex web of systems, that is to say, if you're not constantly aware of the context in which you exist, you and your organizations will do more harm than good. And this natural law of sustainability leads to the first and most important commitment required to make the shift from me to we that is the core of sustainable thinking and acting, and that is to see the ecological and social systems you are part of. You have to understand your context. Now, systems are nested. They come in nested hierarchies, so you need to try to see the interconnections between many, many systems, and you can't easily quantify systems, but you can map them. It's a very easy and a very enlightening process if you have not tried systems mapping from your own family system to the systems within your organization. Each unit of your organization is a system. It's embedded within the larger organizational systems, which in your organization is embedded in even broader social and ecological systems. Mapping those out can be a very enlightening process. But unfortunately, most of us growing up in the West today don't think this way. Starting about 350 years ago with the Enlightenment and the philosophies of John Locke and Hobbes and Adam Smith that spurred the Industrial Revolution and constantly reinforced over the past century, today most of us see ourselves as freestanding, independent entities. And the result is we now live in a culture of what I call extreme individualism, where most of us and most of our organizations are unaware of or unconcerned about the consequences of our actions on the systems we are part of. In fact, if everyone is only responsible for themselves, as we are told, we don't have to be concerned about what others do or about what we do. In fact, we are told to pursue our own self-interest and everything will magically work out for the best. But ample experience shows that this way of thinking is patently wrong and extremely dangerous. From climate change, where all the different entities in the West and other parts of the world are pursuing their own individual self-interest in terms of their use of energy and their consumption, to the economic collapse of 2008 when the financial industry pursued its well-being over everyone else's, we could see that this way of thinking leads to a great deal of problems. And that is because it violates the second natural law of sustainability, which is the law of cause and effect. Every action we take, every word we speak, even every intention we have has an effect on others or on ourselves in some way at some time. And this is something we really have to remember. And this leads to the second law, the second commitment required for the shift from me to we that is at the core of sustainable thinking and acting. Take responsibility for all of the consequences of your actions. Again, it's hard to quantify all the consequences of cause and effect, but they can be mapped. And if you haven't used fishbone diagrams to do that, I would strongly encourage you to play around with that and see if you can broaden your awareness of the law of cause and effect. Now I want you to imagine something very different. Imagine that a genie sweeps you away from your everyday activities in your organization, in your family, and makes you the most powerful decision maker on earth. At your fingertips, you have all of the information that's available in the world to make decisions about how things will operate out there in the universe. But there's a catch. This genie has also given you a very unique form of amnesia. You can't remember what your name is, what your nationality is, where you live, who your family is or where they exist, what religion you belong to, what your economic status is, or who you are in general. You simply can't remember anything about yourself, but you are now the most powerful decision maker on earth. How would you make decisions under that circumstance? Would you do it the same way you do now, based on, for example, cost effectiveness of what you do? I'm going to guess that that's not likely. I'm going to guess that you would instead choose some decision-making process similar to the age-old moral principle called the golden rule, which is to do unto others as you would have them or want them to do unto you. And you would choose that principle because you don't know who you are, and those others might include you. This is the law of moral justice. As far-fetched as the scenario I just described seems, you're not likely to ever be the most powerful decision maker on earth. But it is the reality of today's existence that because of the overpopulated, overconsumed, overpolluted, and overheating nature of the planet today, any action by anyone in the world can affect the systems we are all dependent on for life and come back and affect us now or in the future. And given that, we have to decide how we're going to make decisions from this point forward and how we're going to respond to the very challenging 10 to 20 years that we have ahead of us as we sort of sort our way through this very complex situation we're in. Morality addresses questions about what is right and wrong, what is just and unjust, and fair and unfair about human affairs, and what our duties and obligations are to other people. But our culture of extreme individualism has led most of us to deny or ignore that we have moral obligations to other people. We think morality is purely situational. But that's no longer true. We clearly must decide how we're going to treat others in order to decide how we want them to treat us, given the nature of the world today. Society's most universal moral principle, one that is declared by almost every religion and in fact is built into our laws, is to do no harm. This means we have a moral obligation to prevent unjustifiable human suffering and death to people here in this country, in your country, and abroad, now and in the future. And this leads to the third commitment required to the shift from me to we that is at the core of sustainable thinking and acting, to abide by society's most deeply held universal principles of morality and justice, which is to do no harm. This commitment focuses your attention on the need to constrain the selfish and aggressive aspects of your personality, which are innate. We all have those, but we have a lot more too, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. But by adopting this principle, you and your organizations can develop a way to guide your response to the climate crisis and many other challenges. So think about it. Does your organization have a clear set of moral principles that it lives by and operates by? Do you personally, and does your family have a clear set of moral principles that you try to live by? You might want to just spend some time thinking about that and writing them down clearly to see if there's agreement among the members of your organization, for example, on what it is, what moral principles you operate by. Now I want you to shift gears yet again and imagine the picture of the Earth taken by the Apollo 17 astronauts in 1972 called the Blue Marble. This is the first picture humanity has ever had of our planet as a whole, which is our home. And the astronauts said it looked like, the Earth looked like a glass marble, which is how it came up with its name. Can you see this picture in your mind's eye and see that we're just a little dot in a vast universe. We're disconnected from everything else in space. There are no pipelines going inward that allow us to bring in more resources if we deplete the resources we now have. And there's no discharge pipes going out anywhere that allows us to dispense our toxic material and waste. Everything we do and everything we make stays somewhere right here on our planet or in the immediate atmosphere. And much discussion is occurring now within the scientific community about whether or not we are in a new geological era called the Anthropocene. This is the first time in history when human activities, rather than natural processes, will determine the fate of the Earth, especially climate change. And it's a moral axiom that the more power one has over another, the greater your responsibility to use that power benevolently. And if our activities now determine the fate of all others on Earth, we have a responsibility to manage it for the benefit of all current and future generations. And this is the natural law of trusteeship. This leads to the fourth commitment required for the shift from me to we that is the core of sustainable thinking and action, which is to take responsibility for the continuation of all life. And while the law of moral justice and the commitment to abide by humanity's long-held moral principles of do no harm tries to focus our attention on constraining the selfish and aggressive aspects of our personalities, this commitment focuses your attention on magnifying your innate selfless, caring, and cooperative qualities. And we all have those qualities as well. And we need to magnify those and diminish the aggressive and selfish qualities if we're going to make the shift to me to we, from me to we, and address these issues. So this commitment really clarifies what you personally, your family, and your organization can do about the effects of your actions on the systems you are part of. Now, our culture of extreme individualism came about as a result of specific choices made by our predecessors in response to the conditions they faced at the time. When this extreme individualism emerged, people were coming out of a time of when the church and some landlords heavily controlled everybody. It was a time where people were trying to break free of these very strong cultural restraints, and so individualism became very powerful. But those conditions have now long since passed, and we now face a whole different set of more complex problems and issues. And we consequently must make different choices today. Throughout history, people and societies, whole societies, have changed their beliefs many, many times. We once believed the sun revolved around the earth, that burning people at the stakes kept evil spirits away, et cetera, and we changed those beliefs. This demonstrates the law of free will, that humans have and can change their thinking and can change their practices at any time. It's completely up to us. And this leads, and if we change our beliefs, we end up with different actions. And if we act differently, we produce different results. Human behaviors are based on our beliefs. If we change our beliefs, we can change our actions. And this leads to the fifth and most empowering commitment of the shift from me to we that is at the heart of sustainable thinking and acting, which is to choose your own destiny. You don't have to be controlled by the cultural narratives of our time and all of the things that you've been told over the years and your organization believes about how a business should operate or an organization should operate. You can, in fact, begin to pay attention to the systems you're part of and the consequences of your actions on those systems. You can adopt strong, clear moral principles to guide your reaction to those consequences, and you can take responsibility for all life. Those capacities are fully in your power. And I'd like you just to spend a few seconds thinking about where you personally are strong in each of these commitments. Which commitments do you really try to abide by and live your life by the most, and which do you see some limitations? And at the same time, do the same thing with your organizations. Which of these commitments does your organization follow through on well, and which does it not have a commitment to? And I'd like to suggest that what you can do is, in fact, with your organizations, go out and rate each one of these commitments on a scale of, say, 1 to 5, and have a discussion in your organization. On a scale of 1 to 5, for example, how much does your organization understand the context in which it exists, the systems it's part of? And if it's, a 1, if 5 is outstanding and 1 is poor, if it's a 1 or 2 or 3, have a discussion about how you can expand your understanding of the systems you're part of, and do that all the way through. Now I want to spend a few moments talking about how to implement these commitments into your life and into your organizational practices. How can you make the shift from me to we that is really at the core of sustainable thinking and acting come to life? First, we have to remember that sustainable thinking and acting requires what I call a second-order change. But most of our sustainability efforts today focus on first-order change. And there's a profound difference between the two. First-order change involves tweaks and slight modifications, slight increases in efficiencies to our existing systems, but the structure and dynamics of the system remains the same, as do the goals, and so the outcomes remain the same. Second-order change really involves changing the structure and dynamics and goals of your systems and producing, therefore, very different, truly sustainable outcomes. And how do we bring about this kind of second-order change? One way to think about it is to think about change as a pyramid. At the top of the pyramid of change are the results you want to see, the financial results, the social results, the ecological, the emissions, psychological well-being, et cetera, of whatever it is you're focused on. Below those results are a set of actions that are producing those results, policies, technologies, practices, behaviors, et cetera. And the top of the pyramid is really where most organizations and most of us personally spend our time. We immediately, when we need to address a problem, we say, well, we need a new problem, a new policy, or a new technology, et cetera. But below those two aspects of the top of the pyramid are really where the power of change happens. Below our actions are a set of core beliefs, our worldviews, our assumptions, our values that lead us to act in certain ways. Those core beliefs lead us to develop the policies we develop, to develop the technologies we develop in a certain way. So those core beliefs are critical, and below the core beliefs are experiences we've had, either at a very young age or currently within the organizations we're working with, that lead us to believe certain things, that lead to the actions we take, that produce the results we take. Second order change towards sustainable thinking and acting requires that we make changes at all 4 levels of the pyramid. But in fact, the bottom 2 aspects are really where the major emphasis is going to be if we really want to make significant change. And that's not where we tend to focus. We often shy away from that. We think that dealing with beliefs and assumptions or creating different kinds of experiences is something that's fuzzy. You can't get your head around it. It's real difficult to do. But in fact, that's really what where the power of change lies, and it's really where cultural change takes place. So how can you do that? How can you create a culture of accountability for sustainable thinking and acting in your own life, in your family, and in the organizations you work with by focusing on the pyramid of change? The first step is to go through and sort of identify the current status go through with your teams at work, for example, and really tease out the current results you're producing. What are the environmental results? Many of you do that, but and the financial results. But what are the results on the people that are part of your organization? What are the results on stakeholders? And what are the results on others, including the people that are maybe living near where the resources that your organization uses for its products or services are being extracted from or made? Then go down and talk about what are the actions we're taking that are producing those results? What are the beliefs we hold that lead us to take those actions? And what are the experiences we've had that lead us to adopt those beliefs? That's a difficult process. You need to sort of take some time to do it, but you can do that and identify those current status. And once you do that, what you realize is that the results you're achieving, good, bad, or otherwise, are really the result of your own activities. Yes, you're influenced by factors outside of yourself, of the economy and other sorts of factors, but this is an empowering exercise because you really realize that you've created, for the most part, the results you're producing, personally or organizationally. And that means that you have the capacity to change and produce different results if you want. So then the second step is to go back through and say, what would the second order change in results in B that we really need to be truly sustainable? What do we want? Then go down and ask, okay, what actions do we need to take? What do our policies need to be? What do our technologies, what do our practices and behaviors need to be to produce those results? What kind of thinking, what kind of beliefs do we need to produce those kinds of actions? And what kind of experiences do we have, do we need to produce and reinforce those beliefs? Make those two lists, compare them, hold conversations about them, just to say, here's where we are, here's where we want to be, and then develop an action plan to begin to make that shift and make that stepwise step forward. This can be an extremely powerful process. I want to close by mentioning one other very important point, that there's a real fundamental difference between management and leadership. Management is about keeping complicated sets of people and processes coordinated and working efficiently and effectively together. But leadership is something fundamentally different. It's about creating the vision of the future that people can achieve and should want to achieve, and motivating people and inspiring them to achieve that desired future. And my experience working in sustainability programs over the last 20 years, 25 years with public and private organizations is most sustainability programs are vastly overmanaged and underled. We really don't have the inspiration, the visions that are really, really necessary to motivate people to change their thinking and behavior. The greatest need we have today is to lead change. And I think all of you on the phone are the leaders of the future and the present. And I hope you can keep that in mind, that you're the most important, the role you play is the most important one. So I'd like to close by just reading a poem I've always liked about leaders and leadership. Leaders are called on to act in that lonely place between the no longer and the not yet, and intentionally make decisions that will bind, forge, move, and create history. We are not called on to be popular. We are not called to be safe. We are not called to follow. We are the ones called to change attitudes, to risk displeasure. We are the ones called to gamble our lives for a better future. And that, I think, is our role. And I want to wish you all the best on your journey to sustainability. And now I'm willing to take some questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. I'm glad you finished off with that discussion of loneliness, because I think, even just looking at the chat and a couple of the comments that came across, one of the issues I think that some of the people at the table here feel almost a little bit powerless, that they're in positions where there may be an expectation that they're going to help lead some of this change, but they're not given the power in which to do that. Can can you talk to that a little bit and how we should be attempting to overcome that?
Well, it is always a very tough issue, and thank you for that question. We always feel powerless when we think we're supposed to change the entire world, or at least change our entire organization, but all change starts at the individual level. And that's what we have to first understand. That first, we need to change ourselves. And I asked some questions when I first started about whether you think you know how to change your own thinking and behavior about certain activities. And if you don't, I think that that's the place to start. Really try to get a sense of that. If we can't change our own thinking and behavior, how can we expect others to change, and how can we expect that we would have the capacity to change others? So I think that's really important to start with yourself first. And as you begin to develop your awareness, your capacity to follow these 5 commitments, for example, and as you expand that capacity, you will be a beacon of light that others will begin to follow. And I see that all the time in organizations. Most change within an organization comes not from the top, comes from what I call middle out. People at the middle of the organization, even sometimes at the bottom of the organization, hierarchically speaking, begin to think and act differently. They engage others. They become a role model for others. They engage others. And then change begins to build up, and then you can take a proposed change with a good deal of other people supporting it to senior leadership. And often the leaders, if they're smart, will say, will actually try to look as though they led the parade and jump out in front. But in fact, there's been a tremendous amount of work done internally before that really happens. So I would say start where you are and continue to do your work. Find other partners to work with, other players. Build your collaborative efforts together. And eventually what tends to happen is that enough people begin to make the same kind of shifts that suddenly you've got enough momentum and you start going forward.
And you bring up a good point. I remember talking to some folks at Loyalty One, which is a company up here in Canada, and how it was, in fact, the green team doing some work and looking at what needed to happen that went to senior management, did some things first and showed that there were some great things that could be done, and then went to senior management and said, and here's what else we have to be doing, and really did, it started from the grassroots. Please, we're looking for questions from the floor. So, okay, I'm seeing a couple here. So I'll just, Noreen is asking, are there some effective ways to engage executives in the dialogue on sustainability? What has worked in your experience with work with not-for-profits and other organizations?
Well, it's a very good question. Thank you. First of all, it depends on what the context is. Just as we discussed a second ago, I wouldn't start with an executive unless that's who you're hired to work with or what your role is. I think, again, it's better to start in the middle of the organization or at the bottom and move upwards. But if you're a consultant and that's what you're being asked to start with, I think the process I described is really a very powerful way to engage an executive. Ask them and hold a dialogue with them to tease out what are the actual results that the organization is currently producing. Many times the executive, because of their role, keeps focused predominantly on the financial results. But there are a whole bunch of other results also that affect the financial results that often they don't have the time or the awareness to really tease out. So help them look at how their environmental results affect their financial results, how the people, the motivation within the organization might affect the financial results, et cetera. And then walk them backwards and just hold a conversation. What kind of actions do you think are producing those results? How do you think people are thinking within the organization? What are the beliefs they hold that produce those experiences, those actions? And then what kind of experiences are people having that produce those results? That often is a real eye-opener, especially if you simply ask the question and keep probing and let the executive or executives answer those questions on their own, or you can do it in a very structured way. It's just an example of what I mean by experiences. Everything that happens in an organization is an experience that shapes people's beliefs, and you have to understand that. Everything that happens shapes people's beliefs. So if the CEO or senior leaders or the mayor and the city council drive around in gas-guzzling SUVs, that's an experience that people are having. They go, well, nobody's committed to sustainability here. It doesn't really matter what is written down or what our policies are or that there's a green team. That experience undermines those efforts. So you have to sort of help surface all those kinds of things and then talk about what they want instead. What would you like to have as in your leadership role in terms of our results, et cetera, and go down through the same process. So that's a very powerful process. You have to do it carefully depending on your relationship with the executive, but the more, rather than you telling the executive, you're fleshing that out by asking questions and having them ponder of it. Most executives are pretty smart people. They'll figure that out. It can really help move people along.
And this builds on the question of transparency, which was another question that I heard. So you talked about making your organization and yourself accountable for all the consequences of all your actions. What do we do nowadays when we don't even really fully understand the full consequences of those actions? You know, you go to the store and you buy the $20 coffee maker versus the $60 coffee maker, but it's not written on there that, you know, this comes with child labor and, you know, it's not recyclable and all of those things. What are your suggestions for us in terms of what kind of questions we should be asking ourselves?
Well, those are very important questions, and it's obviously difficult now to find a way to understand all the consequences. But first, just realize that those are the questions you always need to ask. And certainly, if you're the purchasing agent within the organization or working with the purchasing department, you need to help them develop or adopt some protocols for what they're going to screen for. If you've done this process, I've done it a couple of times. We did it with the state of Oregon many, many years ago. You have to go through a series of stepwise processes, stair-step improvements. Most often when you start to ask those questions, the person or organization you're buying the product from doesn't know either. They just bought it from their supplier. So you have to sort of dig deeply back down through the chain and take your time and give, especially if you're an organization that buys in any quantity, give your suppliers some time to make the shift, but tell them we are going to require this kind of information starting 6 months from now or a year from now, whatever it might be, where the product was made, what it includes, who the labor, what the labor was and what the effects on labor have been, et cetera. We want you to go out and get that information. We're going to start buying product only from companies that will provide that information for us, as an example. So you have to sort of drill that down backward, down through the system in a stepwise process. And then there's some shortcuts to the extent that you can and to the extent that they exist, of course. If you can buy certified products, environmentally certified products, FSC certified wood, paper, et cetera, those help also. But it's a tough one. But the real question is we haven't pushed hard enough yet to get transparency to say we want to know the effects of our actions on the systems we're part of. And we want you to begin to do that also in order to get our business.
Oh, that's good. Thank you for that, Bob. I have another question here from Karen, and she's asking, how or do you have any favorite systems thinking resources for facilitating systems awareness in groups? This isn't something that we're actually taught to do in school, is to think about systems. She says that I know about the systems thinking playbook, and I'm wondering if you have other resources that you use. I'm not familiar with the fishbone diagrams or maps.
Well, if you get on the web, you can Google fishbone diagrams and other sorts of things, and or even systems diagrams and ways to diagram systems, and you'll find a tremendous amount of resources there. But also, the Society of Organizational Learning is set up by Daniel Kim and some others. Peter Senge is a very good organization that trains people in organizations on how to think systemically. They tend to focus on larger organizations. Also, Pegasus Communications, which was a spin-off of the Society of Organizational Learning, they basically sell systems thinking, tools, books, handbooks, etc. So they're a great set of tools and books that you can buy. But there's a tremendous amount available on the web, and you could start doing systems diagrams just on your own. I teach a class called Sustainable Thinking, which is systems thinking at the University of Oregon, and this is my teaching term. So I started teaching it 2 weeks ago, and what I start off with is I just have the students begin to map the social and ecological systems they're part of, and you do that by just putting yourself in the middle of the page, put your name there, and then around yourself in a little circle, just identify all the different people that are part of your immediate social system, and then you around them, one layer out, all the different people that are members of your next level out social system. And then I have people sort of identify which people are helpful, which people sort of undermine or are not real contributors to those social systems. And just starting to do that kind of mapping is very enlightening. Students often end up changing their friendships around it through that simple exercise. You can do it with the ecosystems also. So there's simple ways to start doing systems maps, and it can be very, very enlightening.
Thank you very much, Bob. Another question that I have, and I have a couple more here. One has to do with, Camille was talking about, as you were rolling out, here are the principles and the commitments you could make. She was indicating, we have such limitations because of the slowness and the rigidity, a slowness to change and the rigidity that our political and economic systems have. So that, whether it's within our organization or the organization within the broader environment, there are things that hold these unsustainable practices and behaviors in place.
There's no question that we have structural barriers, but the first step is to realize or step back and take a big picture. What kind of thinking created the current structures we currently have? What were our beliefs, our attitudes, our assumptions that led us to create those existing structures that are now tremendous barriers? And that often, again, so go down the pyramid as far as you can. Don't get stuck at the top of the pyramid talking about results and the actions we want to take. Go down and say, what were the thinking and actions of our predecessors, and who thinks and acts in the same way today that is reinforcing that, and how do we begin to help those people and those organizations change their thinking and behavior? Then I think you get, as time goes on, if enough people start to think and act differently, you get social contagion. And that's really where you start to get social change. We are not at the point really anywhere in the world yet where we have that kind of social contagion yet on climate change, for example. So it's not just the barriers we see, we think are so immense that they can't be changed. From the public transportation systems we have that just makes public transportation very difficult, to the energy options we have. We say, well, we really can't scale up renewable energy fast enough. All we have is coal, oil and gas, or other kinds of oil. But in fact, we can change very quickly, and societies have changed very quickly once there's a sufficient number of people who understand the need and options of thinking differently. So I always encourage us to, there are barriers, but to think more deeply about the pyramid of change, and often those barriers quickly drop away.
It almost sounds like this is one of the core things that, green teams seem to be at the front line, organizations that are helping to, get change going among staff. They're usually required or asked to help engage employees. it almost seems like this is one of the first agenda items on the Green Team's discussions is, to go through this pyramid and say, okay, what are the things that are holding us in place, and how do we rethink those?
Yeah, one of the things, just to clarify, when you go through the pyramid, go through carefully, go through slowly, especially when you start to get down to the belief level. People get a little squirmy initially because they don't want to share the real way they think and why they think that way. So you have to sort of facilitate that very carefully. But eventually, if you do it well, if you make sure you have fun doing it, make it a game, make it light, things will start coming out. But often things will come out that you don't want to hear, or at least senior executives don't want to hear about what people believe there. So just keep that in mind. But one of the ways to deal with obstacles, and something I do with organizations quite often, is I have people make a list of all of the major obstacles to the changes you want to see. And you really have to push them and sort of tease it out. Then you ask them which of those obstacles are permanent and which of those obstacles are temporary. And you have to sort of help them tease it out, but most often with a very carefully facilitated process, people will realize that 90 to 95% of the obstacles are temporary, and in fact, if we can create a transition plan, they will become long-term. If we overcome them, they will become long-term benefits to the organization. But it does help sort of thinking it through, putting it down in writing, having people ponder that and go, yeah, actually, right now, the way we use energy is really an obstacle because all we have is, is the ability to use coal. That's what our utility provides. But, if we started to shift over to solar or wind, we would become more self-sufficient. We would be not at the mercy of price spikes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So if we can make that transition, we'll actually end up better off. So how do we make the transition? So it's those kinds of steps and practices that really, again, try to increase awareness and increase mindfulness of everybody in the organization, of the systems you're part of, the consequences of those systems, and what moral principles are you going to adopt to respond to those and change. And don't get caught at the top of the pyramid of change, but what actions are we going to take now to produce different results? Go deeper than that.
Good. That sounds like a good advice. Just two final questions. Noreen was asking, are there any resources, insights, or experiences that you may have related to sustainable procurement and how to implement this more effectively? So again, a change in the way that people see what they should be procuring and why. Have you seen anything that works, or do you have any advice there?
I'd have to think about, it's a good question, I'd have to think about specific tools. I haven't really focused on procurement for a while, but at least from a practical perspective or theoretical perspective, what you want to think about is you want to purchase goods that can work within a closed-loop system, not a linear system. What I call, our current model is take, make, waste. We take resources from the face of the earth, we quickly make them into products and services, and then we shoot them out the other end of our system as waste, often filled with all sorts of toxic materials, back into the very same resource base that we rely on for our original materials. And that's why we have climate change and degrading environmental conditions and social problems also. So if you look for products that can continually be worked within a circular system instead, I call it a borrow, use, return system. Materials that are simply being borrowed temporarily from nature that you can use for human use temporarily, but then can be completely returned back into nature as compost for other growth or back for future use within the economy. Bill McDonough, calls it cradle to cradle, and to sort of think about all the different ways that it clearly means that you want non-toxic materials, but it also means you want goods and services that can be completely taken apart, reused, recycled, It does mean, I think, a big change that's going to come. It's not hit most of us yet, but a big change that is going to have to happen is really going to phase out of fossil fuel-made plastics. And so much of our products are made from plastics today. But that is that we're basically making those products out of oil, and that oil has to go somewhere. It's created a tremendous amount of greenhouse gases in the production process. If it goes underground in the landfill, it's going to cause lots of problems over time. So just think in terms of what products can work within a closed loop or a cradle-to-cradle system, and begin to drill down on that.
Thank you. That's great. And then just one quick final question. Karen is talking about a sustainability or systems thinking again, and I guess with some of the courses that she teaches, she gets the students thinking about an iPod and all of the social and environmental systems that go into that, and I guess it's quite overwhelming. And also she says that, at the end of it, how do you hold the despair that people feel when they see how complicated a mess that we've made for ourselves out of our current systems? How do you help them through that?
Well, that itself is a whole different session. Very good question. I do think when people become aware of the predicament we've sort of got ourselves into, it can be overwhelming. But again, it seems to me that the opportunities before us are also tremendous. I think the future is bright. I think we have tremendous opportunities because of the different alternatives we're going to need and can use to address so many of these issues. So I think it does require really focusing not just on the problems we've created, but on the opportunities that we have to create a better future. Let me close by saying one thing really quickly, that there are three, I didn't talk about it here just for the length of the presentation, there are three keys to change. Anytime you want people to change their thinking behavior, or you want to change your thinking behavior, you have to think about three things. One, dissonance. People don't change unless there's a gap or tension between a desired future and where people are currently. When I worked as a counseling psychologist, people didn't come to me because everything was hunky-dory. People came to me because they were in pain or in stress because there was something they wanted that they weren't getting. It might be a family problem, et cetera. So there's got to be sufficient dissonance. But dissonance alone is not enough. If that's all people feel, if they only feel despair, they'll stick their heads in the sand or blame you for the problem. They also need sufficient efficacy, meaning people have to understand and know that they have the tools, capacity, and know-how, the technologies to solve the problem and reduce the tension and reduce the dissonance. And third, have to have a sufficient sense of benefits. People have to see and understand that applying those tools, increasing efficiency, will in fact they'll end up better off, substantially better off. So always think about dissonance, efficacy, and benefits when you talk to folks, not just the dissonance.
That's terrific. Well, and that gives us a good follow-up opportunity. So at the end of this, everyone, I'll be sending you out a link where you can look more closely at Bob's book, because I think that it would be worthwhile for all of us to have, as leaders, to have a copy of this to go through and help lead people through the process. And then there's also some further training where the second round of our Facilitating Transformational Leadership program is coming up. And this is where we are studying the 9 leadership characteristics that worldwide leading facilitators use in this whole process of facilitating change. So that's something that starts on May 3rd, and it's done online. So last time we had people from right around the world attending it. And so I think the early registration rate for that is coming up early next week. And then also there's the Green Office Gap Assessment program that's also coming up on May 3rd as well for green teams, and that's where you can sign up your whole green team just for one price. So with that, if you're looking for the recording of this presentation, you can go to our website. The login is on the upper right-hand side where that green arrow is. It'll take you to this page, and then you can create an account. And right now on there is Bob Willard's presentation from last month, Making the Strong Business Case for Sustainability, as well as a podcast about why sustainability isn't getting more traction and how to reframe some of the questions and discussions we're having. And thank you so much, Bob, for leading us through this today. It was fantastic. I don't know, can we share the presentation in PDF form with everyone so that they can have that? Okay,
no, you bet.
Thank you so much. And thank you, everyone, so much for coming. I think this is a very important topic for all of us in terms of that idea that we are, in fact, leaders and change makers, and we need to step up to that role in this very difficult time. So thank you very much for coming, and next month, on the third Wednesday of the month, will be a presentation on green project management. So if you have a green team that's interested in that, then you'll see that notice come out as well. Thank you very much, everyone, and thank you for coming to our session.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye.